But you are not a cat.
I am not a cat. Let's talk justice. You are absolutely right. And then on cue comes the Georgia Attorney General, who I don't know if you saw on Rachel last night, but this is what we've been talking about. You don't even need to be a lawyer to go, no, this is illegal. This is criminal. This is not, as you said, this must so frustrate you as a prosecutor that this is not a normal trial, that you have the jurors strategizing with the defense lawyers, and you have 15 jurors just not show up. I mean, what happens, Glenn, in a regular trial if jurors go, I don't feel like listening today?
Well, that's a perfect question, because we actually had a murder trial where we discovered that one of the jurors was communicating with the defendant's lawyer during the course of the trial, trying to help him out. We prosecuted her. We prosecuted that juror, and she ended up in prison. I understand a political hearing is a uniquely political, or an impeachment hearing is a uniquely political animal, right? The rules of convention when it comes to criminal trials do not apply, but the principles are the same. The jurors ought not be corrupt. The jurors ought not be in league or in bed with the defendant's lawyers, but that's what we have. And Steph, angry doesn't begin to describe it. I tweeted out yesterday, as you said, that I almost don't care. Yeah. I don't care what happens in the impeachment trial, because Donald Trump needs to be indicted, convicted, tried, and imprisoned for all of the crimes against the American people. And it looks like maybe Georgia will be the first one out of the gates, dropping an indictment on his head. And Steph, once that first indictment drops, the dam will break. And states are now going to be running to the grand juries to indict Donald Trump, so all of the states can say, me too, we're going to hold this criminal accountable.
I got a little thrill up my leg. I'm not going to lie. But, I feel like first of all, you're in bad shape when your defense lawyer suggests arresting you, which, that's his lawyer did. And I feel like they're daring us. And I'm like, okay, yes, impeachment is the first order of business. It's their duty. But then, yes, this is criminal. But you know what they'll say? Oh, we don't. In fact, Chris Christie said this to my face. And I remember, Travis, I saw him, backstage somewhere. I was with Malcolm Nance. And I said, this guy's going to jail. And he goes, we don't put former presidents in jail. I'm like, this one's going to jail. Because that's what they'll say. It's like, oh, well, that was for impeachment. Now they say, oh, no, this is for a criminal trial. And then when we indict him, they'll say, oh, no, well, we don't do that to former presidents, right?
Yeah, that's the bait and switch. First of all, my condolences for having to come face to face with Chris Christie.
I poked him in the chest.
Look, this was a calculation. His attorneys, they're not good at this lawyering thing. We've seen that. But it was a calculation when his lawyer said, oh, you know what? Donald Trump can be criminally indicted for this conduct. Therefore, he shouldn't be impeached, or you shouldn't vote guilty in an impeachment proceeding. And then when he's indicted, his new criminal defense attorney, who he will also not be paying, will argue, no. Donald Trump shouldn't be criminally indicted for this. He should have been convicted in the impeachment trial. This is an easy, obvious, transparent bait and switch argument.
Yeah. Can I get through what his lawyer is going to say today without you vomiting? We'll see. Because I did. I threw up a little bit. David Schoen says his client was quite offended by the raft of evidence shown by House managers that many of his insurrectionists believed they were acting on his orders. He offered an assessment of Trump's mood. Let me explain how many flying I give about that right now. But he said the president is very upbeat. He has condemned the violence and doesn't in any way want to be associated with what happened in this violent incident. He has condemned the people involved and obviously quite offended at being tied to it. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. Really? They're going to take the one time he said peaceably, in an 11,000-word speech, and not the 25 times he said fight. Where do you even start with this stuff? About he condemned the violence, not till an entire day later when he was forced into it, right?
Yeah. Steph, think about this. We learned during the course of the week that Donald Trump spent $50 million from his legal defense fund to put on this Donald Trump production, right? To organize it, to encourage people to come to D.C. He then riled them up. They were basically a loaded gun in his hand, and he pointed the mob at the Capitol and he fired. And, you know, this is his responsibility from start to finish. Here's the one question I would ask. Is there anybody foolish enough to believe that absent Donald Trump organizing this, orchestrating it, and paying $50 million to make it happen, do we think Donald Trump's supporters would have spontaneously assembled in Washington,
on that date,
D.C.
at that time,
on January 6th and marched on the Capitol to discourage the members of Congress from certifying the election results? Are you kidding me? This was a Donald Trump production.
Yep. And I wanted to ask you about that, which you thought, because Stacey Plaskett brought that out, that, you know, he's the one that, when he got involved, the permit was only to the ellipse, not to the Capitol. I mean, Amanda Carpenter, I saved a couple tweets for you. She said, we're not talking enough about how the White House worked with outside groups to change the date and the permit of the riot rally to occur on January 6th and allow people to march to the Capitol. So you're right, the whole thing, as you say, was a Donald Trump production. And I mean, the timing, I felt like the timeline was almost the most damning thing, wasn't it? All of it. Time of the tweets and the statements and what the call to, I mean, how about Senator Tuberville is the one that, you know, confirmed, right, what Mike Lee was trying to pull his stunt over. That he told that, yes, they tried to call him in the middle of the riot to slow down the vote. They all had the same aim, the rioters and Donald Trump, and that he said he told him the vice president was taken out. And after that, he tweeted about the vice president attacking him, right?
Yeah, which makes Tuberville and Mike Lee and company complicit in what happened, because in real time they were actively engaged in trying to further the criminal interest. Garland, once he's in place, is going to need to investigate all of this, and I see lots of criminal culpability. And let me add as a footnote, when you mentioned Stacey Plaskett and Joe Neguse and Jamie Raskin, these people are heroes. Yeah. And I was so inspired by the prosecutorial performance of these three and all of the other House managers. It was remarkable. It was indisputable. You know, it's inarguable that Donald Trump is guilty of these things, but we've got, 40 some odd compromised jurors, the Republicans, and those jurors are witnesses to the insurrection, victims of the insurrection, and some of them, like Cruz, Hawley, and others, are complicit in the insurrection. So the one thing we're not going to get is a fair trial.
Well, I know all these things that would normally matter, right? This headline, Trump advisor said he hasn't shown remorse for the insurrection. Well, of course not. That's one thing you look for in a criminal trial, right? Advisors to Trump say he has still not expressed remorse. I love this. Pence, who has plans to keep laying low during impeachment, has not quite patched up his relationship with Trump after what happened. You know how it is when a person puts one hit out on you. God, don't get all grumpy.
Why can't he let bygones be bygones?
Right. He got his point across at the meeting afterwards, the meeting with Pence and Trump, although there were some lingering hard feelings. Oh, God, move on. Trump did not express remorse for putting Pence in a harrowing situation. At the meeting, the source said that's not his style. As for the siege, an advisor said Trump wanted to see a show of force. Trump likes force. He saw people forcefully fighting for him. That lines up with what a former senior White House official said, that Trump was loving watching the mob. A source close to Trump who has discussed the impeachment with him acknowledged the facts are really bad for Trump. They said the new video was undeniably powerful. When asked if Trump has any remorse, the source laughed and said there's no greater offense to Trump than saying sorry. So there's nothing that follows a normal trial, right? Of course he's not going to...
He hasn't expressed remorse because he is incapable of feeling remorse. The only time I can ever recall him saying the words, "I'm sorry," was after the Access Hollywood tape, when people basically force-fed him those two words and said, if you don't say these two words, you're done. That's, I think, the only time he's ever apologized. And of course, he infamously said, I never have to ask God for forgiveness because, I never do anything wrong.
Oh, and then he said later it wasn't him on the tape. That 17,000 conspiracy theories ago. Yeah.
Right. There's nothing normal about this trial. There's nothing normal about Donald Trump. And, what I wish people would really appreciate is this is a murder trial. This is a murder trial. Yes, it's an insurrection trial, but Donald Trump fired his weapon, the angry mob, on the Capitol, and Brian Sicknick was killed and other people died. This is a murder trial. And the one thing I will say I would do a little bit differently than the House managers is I would call a couple of witnesses, including the actual victims, the police officers who lost an eye, who lost fingers, who lost brain function as a result of being beaten with Trump flags and other things that day. And I would also call the next of kin for Brian Sicknick, because a marquee moment, Steph, in every murder trial is when we put the mother or the spouse or the child of the decedent, the person who was killed, on the stand. And you know what? The jury gets to see firsthand the kind of loss and devastation that Donald Trump has done. He's blown holes in the Sicknick family, and he has destroyed the lives of the other officers and civilians who were attacked by the mob that day. And I would like to see the human face of the pain, the suffering, and the loss induced by Donald Trump.
Glenn, I agree with you. Why do you think they didn't call witnesses? I mean, I was, because when they controlled the Senate, the first impeachment trial, remember how frustrated we all were because they wouldn't allow witnesses. We were in charge this time. We could have called witnesses. Why didn't we?
I assume that they were cowed into it by the Republicans who said, if you call witnesses, we're going to call 100 witnesses. They'll be frivolous. They won't have anything relevant to add to the mix, but it will then blow up into this crazy circus, a freak show, courtesy of the Republicans. And what does that do, Steph? It derails everything else that we're desperately waiting to have happen, like Merrick Garland getting in place so we can start to indict these people.
Pause. Okay. Yeah, Lawrence Tribe said Trump will do it again if given the chance. Just think about that. I mean, I think of my friend Adam Schiff. Absolutely right about everything. He will do it again. If we don't stop him, he will do it again. And he did. And I think one of the points made, Glenn, is this is an ongoing coup. This is about preventing. Who said yesterday, do you think this is over? Do you think this Trump-inspired violence is over? I mean, this is part of it, is stopping it from happening again. And this is an ongoing, whatever you want to call it, coup, whatever, right?
Yes. Steph, and Ted Lieu said yesterday, I'm not afraid that he's going to run and win in the future. I'm afraid he's going to run and lose because look at what that has produced. And, Jamie Raskin was brilliant when he said, listen, if he ends up back in the Oval Office, is there anybody who believes he won't resort to violence again to get what he wants? And if you believe that, are you willing to bet the lives of other police officers on that? Are you willing to bet the lives of your family? Are you willing to bet the future of democracy on that? Of course he will resort to violence again to get what he wants, which is why I don't care what the impeachment vote is. I want a grand jury to vote to indict him. And I want him to go to prison for what he did to the American people and to the immigrants in our country.
And problem is, this is what I'm afraid of, is they'll say, no, we have to move on, unity, blah, blah, blah. I think you're right. It's not, obviously the states are already going to be involved. He's going to be prosecuted on a number of levels, Glenn, but I think it's important that the U.S., I just wonder if Merrick Garland will, if they will, because I don't understand how you just go, oh, well, let's just move on from this, from armed insurrection against the United States of America. How do you just go, oh, well, Yeah.
So Steph, remember this. Merrick Garland cut his prosecutorial teeth on prosecuting Mayor Marion Barry for that infamous crack incident years ago. That was in my former office, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah.
He then cut his domestic terrorism teeth by supervising the investigation and prosecution into the Oklahoma City bombing case. He's a man who can handle public corruption cases, and he's a man who can handle and has the most dramatic domestic terrorism cases. And you know what Trump has just done? He has married those two things, public corruption and domestic terrorism, for what he inspired and incited at the Capitol. Merrick Garland, Steph, is the right man for this moment in time, and he's going to get the job done.
Okay. I'm perusing my old law school books, and that was the bitch set me up defense was in the Marion Barry?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
Yeah, I've used that.
Yeah, she has used that.
I've lived my life by it. I mean, you made a good point on Twitter, Glenn, before we go. You said, can we take a minute to celebrate President Biden's decision to leave in place 2 U.S. attorneys so as not to give even the appearance that he's trying to interfere in investigations? President Biden is giving us honest, honorable, ethical government we deserve. And you say it's flat out inspirational. And it's BS. The one, investigating Hunter Biden's taxes, and then John Durham investigating the origins of the Russia investigation. But but you're right. It is something we're not used to. We're like, oh, independence at the Justice Department again.
Yeah, Steph, if I can end on this good news story, because this is such a good news story that flew under the radar. Joe Biden is in a place now where, like every other president, he's ready to say, okay, I'd like all of the resignations from all of the U.S. attorneys around the country. Mm-hmm. Every administration does that because the U.S. attorneys are presidential appointees and they serve at the pleasure of the president. So the president has every right, and it's the expectation that he will come in and ask for the resignation so he can put people in place who share his values and his law enforcement priorities. Joe Biden said, I'm going to be asking for everybody's resignation except two U.S. attorneys. The one who is investigating the FBI opening the investigation into the Trump campaign, the Trump-Russia thing. Why? Because the FBI opened that investigation when President Obama was president and I was vice president, and I don't want anybody to think I'm interfering in that investigation running its course. And the second one, which is the one that really gave me patriotic goosebumps, Steph, was he said, I am going to leave the U.S. attorney in place in Delaware who's investigating my son, because I don't even want to give the perception of interfering with that investigation. Steph, this is the government we, the people, deserve. This is the government that we've been longing for 4 years. God bless Joe Biden for making that decision.
Yes, and God bless the United States of America. Real quick, Glenn, because I know a lot of people, George Conway, say rigged equals 15 senators allowed to vote after not showing up to hear the evidence. Maddie said, so CNN reporting 15 senators not in attendance. Is that a violation of their oath for the trial? I mean, I don't know what this Mitch McConnell, meeting is about on the floor over there, but could he say you can't vote if you weren't here? I mean, what? Yeah.
They could try to change the Senate rules on the fly or the impeachment rules on the fly. I don't think that would meet with any success. This is a political proceeding. It's not a legal proceeding, so they can make up the rules as they go along. Those unpatriotic people will be allowed to vote. They will not vote their conscience. They violate their oaths every day, and I expect that they're going to do it again.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's not the hashtag justice is coming I wanted to end on, but listen, we got enough. Love you, Glenn.
Than's, Glenn.
Love you, Steph.
See you next
guys.
time. Okay.
Thanks.
52 minutes after the hour. This portion of the show, it's not good to put the Casper mattress ad right after Glenn Kirschner, because I'm going to...